All of us economy flyers out there are apparently subsidizing high rollers who like to get around on private jets. You probably didn't know that, did you? But that's absolutely the case. Believe it or not, private travel has actually surged in the United States. Private jets make up 1 out of every 6 flights handled by the Federal Aviation Administration's air traffic controllers. Now, that's an agency that needs to get paid. They need resources in order to function, and our taxes help to fund their operations. The only problem is the way that those funds and the way that those taxes are collected is incredibly unfair to ordinary Americans who are footing the vast majority of the bill. Now, the Institute for Policy Studies and Patriotic Millionaires put out a new report that shows that private jet travelers pay just 2% of the taxes used to fund the FAA. 2%. That's it, just 2%. The rest comes from us. So how? Commercial flyers must pay a tax on every ticket equivalent to 7.5% of the fare price. But private flyers only pay a jet fuel tax. And while commercial plane tickets have increased in price in recent years, jet fuel costs have remained steady, the report found, meaning that commercial travelers are ponying up an increasing portion of the taxes, which is infuriating. How is this not infuriating? And it gets even more infuriating once you realize how much those taxes were cut further through the CARES Act under the Biden administration. Now let's break this down into specific numbers, because once you do that, you'll realize that the reality of this whole unfair situation is even more infuriating. So jet fuel taxes made up $186 million of the more than $8 billion, billion with a B, in tax revenue that was allocated to the AATF in fiscal year 2021, or about 2% of the fund's total taxed revenue, the report read. Meanwhile, more than half of the AATF's tax revenue, $5.32 billion, came from passenger taxes, meaning the taxes ordinary people like you or I pay when we buy a ticket to fly anywhere. So it gets even worse than that. Private jets also use almost 3,000 of the country's smaller airports that aren't used by any commercial airlines, but are indeed funded in part by the FAA. So in other words, taxpayers are subsidizing the infrastructure that commercial flyers don't use, because again, these are airports that commercial planes do not operate out of. The funds the FAA sends to these airports, known as general aviation airports, are generated in large part from the taxes that commercial travelers are paying every time that they buy a ticket to travel. And we're also subsidizing and paying for the pollution that these private jets put out into the environment. Private jets emit up to 14 times more climate warming pollution per passenger than commercial planes. And that's according to the NGO known as Transport and Environment. They did a report of their own in 2021, and that's what they found. The IPE and Patriotic Millionaires recommend that the government double the federal jet fuel tax from 0.219 per gallon, cents per gallon, to 0.438 cents per gallon to discourage short flights, discourage flying, and fund sustainability efforts. And the report estimated that Elon Musk, who with 171 flights was the most active private flyer in the United States last year, would have paid nearly $97,000, honestly chump change for him, in federal jet fuel taxes on the approximately 221,358 gallons of jet fuel he consumed in 2022 under the proposed higher tax. And what I find so amazing is that when it comes to people like Elon Musk, when it comes to some of the wealthier individuals, the billionaires in this country, they love to attack Joe Biden as some sort of Marxist, like he's a socialist and he's really hurting big business and he's really this high tax, high regulation guy. When in reality, the first thing Biden did as president of the United States back in 2021 was the CARES Act. And the CARES Act included a lot of goodies, a lot of provisions for the rich and the famous, namely tax cuts that impact those who like to travel on private jets. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, this is what I mean.
The CARES Act suspended the 7.5% federal excise tax on private jet flights for the rest of this year, but there was a loophole, no expiration date for those flights. So you could buy the flights now and take them years from now. Private jet companies are launching big bulk jet cars that don't expire for 4 years or even longer. NetJets, Magellan, Jets.com, lots of others racking up big sales right now with cards of up to 100 hours that are tax-free. So if you bought 100 hours on a G450 from Magellan for $1.2 million, you would save $94,000 on taxes. And by the way, you don't have to take the flight until 2024. Now, some companies like Sentient or Fly Exclusive don't even have any expiration date. So you can take these flights anytime until the funds run out.
I mean, so as our flights on commercial planes become more and more expensive and more miserable, to be honest with you, right? They do calculated misery. So you're more willing to spend more money for minor comforts on a commercial flight, right? I mean, you feel like you're in a tin can, you're squished, there's barely any room in the seat, and they find new fees and new ways. Basically, the travel has become far more expensive for ordinary people. At the same time, they're footing the bill for the FAA through the taxes that they pay for every single ticket that they buy for these flights. And in the meantime, the wealthy, the people who get to travel around in these private jets, spreading all this pollution, all that stuff, they get the tax break. They get to experience the benefits of our tax money, basically making it easier and better for them to travel, while our experience becomes far worse year after year. And so I just want you all to remember what happened during the holidays in 2022, when all those flights were canceled, when the federal government was hemming and hawing and basically saying that they were gonna do something to make the situation better. There were some fines for some of these airlines. But look, at the end of the day, I don't begrudge people who are well-to-do, okay? I don't begrudge people for wanting nice things. I don't wanna feed into hatred of any group of people, including those who have been successful financially. I just think that they should pay their fair share. I think it's unfair for ordinary working Americans who year after year are getting crushed by all sorts of things, whether it be higher taxes, inflation, all that stuff. I'm tired of them being the ones who fund everything in this country, while the richest people who could certainly afford to pay a higher percentage of their income toward taxes basically get away with paying far less. Whether we're talking about corporations or whether we're talking about, individual wealthy travelers who travel on private jets, it's just an unfair system. This country is overwhelmingly funded by the middle class in America, by working Americans. And I'm so sick of them getting screwed over. So while on one hand, I give Biden credit for wanting to do something to tackle junk fees that are charged by corporations and banks, I do want to call him out for this tax break for private jet travelers in the CARES Act. Get it together. It's not right for ordinary Americans to foot the bill for the fancy travel of billionaires.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.